What if Naruto loved with Sansa and Margery?
Many a man know the horrific story of the reigns of Castamere. Many know of how the monster Tywin Lannister destroyed the Tarbecks by putting them to tea. How Lord Tywin barred and flooded Castamere, wiping out the entire lineage of the Crimson Lion. What many do not know, however, is that this was a lie. Lord Castamere and wiped out many of the reigns, their bodies left to rot in their once glorious hall now turned tomb. However, a handful of reigns escaped, not to restart their infamous rebellion. However, just enough to keep some influence. Especially with their houses, former largest of which being of course House T. Reached. More in particular, Lady Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns. Her mind, sharper than any blade. When the reigns arrived at Highgarden they were given a small patch of land to settle, and though they lived comfortably, they never forgot their fall and their revenge. The Crimson Lion hung on banners above a small fortress on the coast of the Reach. Around it, a storm was brewing. The seas crashed and raved, waves roared and battered themselves against the shoreline. The rain battered the small fort's great walls and keep. Within the keep itself, somehow, overcoming was the wail of a woman. The woman was laid upon her back, her legs opened in front of a midwife. The wailing woman herself was beautiful. Her pure blonde age. Sun itself, her skin although a healthy pale gave her an appearance similar to that of a heavenly angel, her eyes although screwed shut at the moment, when gorgeous honey gold capturing any who witnessed them in a web of desire. This woman's name was Ellaria Rain. One of the last of her family in existence. B. Heavily built man, he too had blonde hair, yet his was a darker strawberry blonde, a full beard covered his weathered face, giving him the brutish look of an singular dark eye that sat in his right socket, the left scarred and covered by a black eye patch lined with silver thread. The orb that sat in his right eye was the woman next to him, denoting their familial relation. His name was Eric the Red Rose Rain, cousin to the woman who laid next to him. Ellaria let out another swollen stomach, twitched with every movement, and the midwife leaned off the bed to look up at Ellaria. One more push, my lady, the head is visible to me now. A hushed tone. Eric leaned over and held Ellaria's hand, his huge paw covering her own as he rubbed the back of her hand in small tight circles with his thumb. The chainmail age shivered with his movement. Keep pushing, my love. You're almost finished, he whispered, trying his best to soothe her pain. In response she just seemed to scream louder, tensing and pushing with all her might. Soon a second wail pierced the air. The midwife came around to the showing both parents their new child. He was a large for child, following that of his father. However, on the top of his head sat a tuft of bright blonde hair. Remen. The midwife gently moved the child into the tired woman's arms. Her chest still heaved with exertion, but tears of joy rolled down her face, streaking through down at the child. Her eyes glittered with happiness. My sweet child, how beautiful you are, truly one of our blood. She whispered love and happiness words. Beside her Eric stood and opened his arms. May I hold our child, my love? He asked, joy filled both his eye and his tone. Ellaria held the child out to the bias carefully as she could. As she passed him over, his cries died down and his eyes opened, both truly golden, easily showing his lineage. With those golden eyes the boy curiously looked. Hands then coming up to grasp his father's larger ones. Truly a son of the Crimson Lion. What should we name him, my love? As he said this, the storm outside truly grew powerful. Lightning struck around the castle, swirled with the wrath of the gods. Ellaria looked out the window, taking in the entire storm, eyes wide with awe. Lightning struck again and the baby cried out. As if the child's voice harmonized with the rolls of thunder. Naruto, she thought, an old Valyrian word for the whirlpools that surrounded the coasts of the west. Turned to her husband, her sudden movement making him look up from the child. Naruto, that shall be his name. She spoke softly. Eric furrowed his brow. Naruto, what does it mean? he asked with confusion evident. Maelstrom. A true child of the storms, she replied, pointing to the stewing storms outside the window. Eric nodded. Naruto tutor, it shall be a truly powerful name, he grinned as he spoke. Elaria turned to him, confused. Tutor. Eric nodded. A name I picked up while fighting for Lord Mace, just so that bastard lion wouldn't recognize me. He spat. It is also why I've decided to change our banner. Elaria raised a delicate eyebrow. Before she could retort, however, Eric held up a hand. I did not want to do it either. However, I had to protect both us and the child. If not, that bastard lion or his whore daughter might find us. The Tyrells can. Long. The conviction in his voice made her pause. She thought for a moment, then nodded. What shall our banner be then, since you wish to make such changes? She questioned. Eric placed Naruto onto the bed next to Elaria, allowing her to hold the child close. Our banner will be 2 roses forming one, a red rose showing our house and a gold rose showing our allegiance to House Tyrell, and our house motto shall be as any blade. 15 years later. It had been 15 years since that fateful day, and Naruto had grown well and strong. His father had started training him from the moment he could walk, sword riding, and more, all of which he took to like a fish to water. The Tyrells had visited the old fort many times over the years since he had been born. Having Ida as him had helped to foster good relations between the two families more than they already had. They had further helped his growth by supplying him with some of the best teachers in Westeros. From tacticians to politicians and philosophers. All were brew. Finest money to teach the young child. With their aid, and the teaching of his father, Naruto grew to be one of the smartest and best trained men by age 14. And his mother, Elaria, allowed him to become a steward of House Tyrell. Here we find him in Highgarden, one of the personal bodyguards and confidants of the heiress of Highgarden. He stood outside her room, a tall, well-built Tina. He wore an embellished black leather tunic with a darker burgundy surcoat and chainmail beneath it with leather shoes. At his side sat a falchion, tapping his S. His hair was a bright blonde and spiky on its own, his bright gold eyes both beautiful and dangerous. He knocked on the door. My lady, we must leave soon for the Hans tourney, Naruto spoke, his deep smooth voice reverberating through the door. Must we truly attend this event, my dear? A beautiful melodious voice responded. Yes, Lady Margery, your father Lord Tyrell has ordered us to be ready to leave within the hour. I am also to compete for the honor of our 2 houses, he res. The door opened and there stood a beautiful maiden, her long brown hair falling around her shoulders and back in a curtain of chestnut curling at the ends. Hide, forcing her to look up at Naruto. She wore a light green dress that wrapped around her upper body, accentuating her curves and pushing up her bras. That dares look at her to take in the sight, her lightly tanned skin and high cheekbones showing her highborn status. Her doe eyes stared up at him, pouting. Why must I be forced by father to go? He knows I hate such events, she continued to pout. Naruto smirked at her. My lady, do you not wish to see me win? Do you not wish to see your beloved stand before the king as a knight of the Reach, he whispered. Down at her, she sighed lightly and put her hand to his chest. Fine. Accompany me down to the courtyard if I must go, she replied despondently and began to walk. Naruto nodded and walked beside her, behind 2 Tyre. Followed loyally. As they arrived at the courtyard, they found her brother Loras Tyrell and her father Lord Mace Tyrell. Loras was a tall man of 6, not a particular. Of respectable stature, a truly impressive knight. However, Naruto did not trust him to stand nor ride behind him. Too many rumors were afoot of Loras and his sword, not that it was any of his business. His father and Naruto's liege lord, Lord Mace Tyrell, was a portly man that stood shorter than his favored son, was a man of jovial nature yet taken for a fool and easily swayed, especially by his mother Lady Olenna, who sat in a gilded carriage in the middle of the courtyard mounted men at arms, a powerful rock of a woman that while old still held a huge amount of power and sway within Highgarden. Naruto followed Margery as she walked towards her father and sibling. She first hugged her father and then her brother. "Father, brother. How long is the Jew last before we reach King's Landing?" she asked, her hands clasped in front of her. "My darling daughter, my scouts tell me it would take us at good speed 10 weeks to get to King's Landing just in time for the tourney of the hand," he replied, chest huffed with each word. "We shall have enough time to see your brother and bodyguard take part, don't worry." He smiled and stroked her hair. Margery smiled at her father as she climbed into the carriage that held Olena. She bowed to her grandmother as Naruto helped her in. He nodded to Olena. Nodded to him. He bowed back and walked towards his horse. "Lord Tyrell, shall we be on our way?" Naruto said as he mounted his large Frisian. Mace nodded. "Let us be off then so we may get this over with. I wish not to stay any longer than necessary, onward." And with that, the large contingent of K. Arms rode out of Highgarden, passing its gleaming white walls and riding into the countryside. 1 month later. The Tyrell's contingent had stopped to make camp for the night. The month of travel hadn't been too precarious. The Lord of the Reach's entourage was large. Petty bandits and thieves didn't dare approach, too many heavily armed knights to even contemplate. Naruto, however, was bored. Bored as hell. So far he'd having his fair share of spars and conversations with the household guard around him, as well as having his nightly debates and rests with Margery, both in J company. However, on this night, he'd decided to take a ride out by himself. After all, what's the worst that could happen? Naruto had been riding for about 20 minutes. It had been a quiet journey so far, with only the rustle of the underbrush animals and the hooting of the owls. Loud piercing howl, followed by a loud growls and whines and whimpers. Naruto's horse reared up in fear. Naruto leaned over and whispered to the horse, "Pattern," rubbing it, calming it down. Naruto leapt down off the horse, tying it to a tree nearby. He drew a knife as he crept toward the noise, pulling aside the bush slow. Surprising sight. 3 large pups laid next to their half-dead mother, each one different in color yet larger than the normal dog even at that size. One pup was pure black opposite and a snowy white. The middle one, however, was the clear elder sibling, being the largest of the 3 and having a shaggy black coat with small white. Got closer, he began to recognize some of the features on the dog-like animals. 1, even being a juvenile epicene, he could still see the jaws of the animals, though. A hand off, Naruto approached cautiously, his hands out in front of him and his dagger ray-sheathed. The largest of the dogs turned to him, and that's when they were epicene, he thought. One of the Maester's lessons came back to him. Flashback. The Maester turned to Naruto and the other nobles' children as he taught, "These are the paintings of some long dead and some highly endangered," he rasped. Naruto turned to him and pointed at one of the paintings depicting a large dog-like animal. "Maester Aaron, what beast is that?" The Maester turned. "That, my young inquisitive charge, is an epicene, a long endangered relative of our hunting hounds. Huge animals with jaws that can crew. And even in some cases plate armor. However, they were hunted for their powerful bones and teeth for daggers." Naruto nodded in acceptance of the answer, but then furrowed his brow and raised his hand again. "Would we be able to find any now in the wild?" The Maester looked up in thought. "Maybe, however only in the wildest of places, or they might even possibly be extinct." He then looked at Naruto with a SL. "You thinking of trying to find one for yourself? You'd be one of the richest men in Westeros, behind only those with dragon eggs." Naruto nodded, but then replied, "I'd rather not sell them. Such a powerful beast would be a good aid in my protection of the princess." Naruto nodded to him's thought, and the Maester continued the lesson. Flashback over. One of the dog-like beasts approached Naruto cautiously, sniffing and staring him down. The other 2 followed suit, despite them being the size of a small hunty. Not discouraged, and held out his hand, letting the dog sniff it. The largest turned and started to growl at the bushes behind them. The bushes rustled, then parted, and out came several men. The small group was poorly wearing only grungy robes and leather jerkins. Each one held either a small cutlass rusted beyond belief, while the man in the center carried a rusted and chip blade begged to be put out of its misery with the mistreatment it had been given. The man in the center stepped forward and sent a malformed grin at Naruto, his eyes a dark muddy brown, his face was ugly and misshapen and his grin yellow teeth. "Boy," he slurred, "give us all your gold and your clothes and weapons, and the boys may just let you live." The other men laughed and elbowed each, obviously intoxicated. Naruto slowly rose to his full height, towering over the bandits. "Are you sure you wish to do this now? If we start," he paused, "all of you are going to die in it. So I suggest you leave." They didn't let him finish. The bandit leader swung his sword. It was a wild, uncontrollable swing. Naruto stepped back out of its range and the bandit leader stumbled forwards. Naruto grabbed his falchion. With one smooth he split the soft ugly skull of the bandit leader. His skull split open like a soft melon, its putrid insides split out. Blood sp. Arm. "Any more of you want to dance? After all it takes two tango." Naruto laughed out. He had an intense yet wild smile on his face as he kicked the bandit off his SW. Around him yipped and barked, lapping up the fallen blood. The other bandits rushed him, trying to avenge their leader. The first one was a tall, gaunt-looking man with spindly arms. He used a rusted boarding axe and swung the axe down and it shattered as Naruto blocked it with his blade. He flicked his wrist and the man's throat opened, his lifeblood gushing out, and he last TWO bandits rushed him, their blade and cudgels respectively swung widely at Naruto. He ducked the swing of the first bandit and blocked the swing of the out with his free hand, catching the bandit on the left with a powerful left hook, knocking him back. Naruto spun again and swung the heavy blade, cutting the bandit clean off. The limb flew, only for the largest of the pups to catch it mid-flight. The bandit screamed, only for the scream to break off into a wet gurgle as one of the pups jumped and clamped its jaws around his head, with a gut-wrenching clench of its jaws. More. And then there was one, Naruto quipped as he strolled toward the last bandit. His menacing grin was permanently etched. Naruto stopped, then turned back. "We're still feasting on the core of the last fool. Hey, would you three like a snack?" The man scrambled onto his feet as the pups yipped and growled at Naruto before turning towards him and baring their fangs. The man turned to run, but bef. Something close around his ankle in a tight, painful vice. He turned his head and looked down, only to see the second largest beast's jaws around his ankle. He shaking his foot left and right as much as he could, yet it did nothing but crunch down harder, and that's when he felt it. The bones in his legs turned to dust. The beast's jaws were simply too powerful. They tore his tendons and crushed the bones, leaving nothing but a mangled mess of a leg left. The dog-like beast's to side, with the man's leg still closed in its immensely powerful jaws. The man screamed as his leg was torn off at the knee, leaving nothing but a torn mess. Naruto cringed. "Let's see if we can put you out of your misery. Let's see how they listen." Naruto then whistled. The pitch changed between high and low for Seve. 3 Epicyan lifted their heads and stared at him, their full attention laid undivided with him. Naruto pointed at the now bleeding out bandit that was trying to away. "Kill him." The beasts pounced on him immediately. He never stood a chance. A couple hours later, Naruto watched his new pets chew the last of the bandits after he'd buried their mother. Despite looking relatively healthy, it seemed that she had gained fighting off poachers and other animals. She'd been on her last legs by the time the cubs had been born. He'd also given name to each of the cubs. The largest had been named Sheba after an ancient queen from a legend he'd heard of the Far East. The second cub he'd named Ramses, the last he had named Achilles, AF. Fathers that had fallen many moons ago. Naruto turned as he heard crunch of dry leaves and grass as well as the relatively heavy steps of horses. Behind him approached 3 of the knights that had Tyrells across the countryside. The knight in the center of the trio rode closer to him while the others stayed a ways back. "Lord Naruto, Lord Mace has requested your presence and as such had deployed us to accompany you. The knight closest to him spoke, his head bowed in res. Naruto stood and turned to them. What is it he wished to discuss with me? Naruto asked as he strolled toward his horse. The cubs saw this and followed him. Horse and nipping at each other. The knight shrugged, he did not deem it necessary to inform us, he only told us to fetch you and we followed your trail. Naruto nodded. That sounds like him. All right, let us be on our way so I can get this over with. With that Naruto rode off. The knights took up positions around. Ran beside him. After half an hour of travel they finally arrived back at the camp. Margery herself stood at the entrance to the massive campsite. The moon hung high in the beautiful seductive light. She stood surrounded by a retinue of 10 men all armed and armored, eyes scanning for any danger to their lieges. Beside her stood Grandmother Olena. Mace strode forward. Naruto, my boy, where have you been? I've been searching for you to discuss what we're going to the tourney to show and do. He paused and then took in AD. And was about to speak till Olena cut him off. Naruto, it is likely that you will be either fighting the Kingslayer or that buffoon the Mountain. It is in our best interest that if faced against them you kill them. You mangle them enough that they cannot fight. As she said this, Naruto came and kneeled in front of her. I give you my blessing to do what is necessary to double you. Words. She walked back toward her tent. Come my granddaughter, we have much to discuss. Margery curtsied to her father, then winked at Naruto as she fall. Grandmother, her hips swaying in a hypnotic fashion capturing the entirety of his attention. Naruto stood and followed Mace as he plodded towards his tent, the second largest tent in the large campsite, second only to Mace's mother's. Inside the large, around a large round red oak table, the table was rounded off and layered with gold vines around the edge, and in the center sat a gold rose. This was the tier. Both dangerous situations and war. Around the table sat the warden of the South's Council of War and his lesser lords. From left to right sat Randall Tarley, Lord. And one of Naruto's many instructors, a hawkish-looking man but one not to be trifled with, a highly intelligent man that excelled in the gifts of warfare, having King his first and only defeat in open combat. Beside him sat Willuk Redwine, Lord of the Arbor, an older strict-looking man who was the master of the Koman Reach and the man who taught Naruto the vital knowledge of sea warfare and seafaring, as well as forming political alliances. Next to him sat Naruto's own Fath, was engaged in a heated debate with the Redwine Lord. On his other side sat Kevin Florent of House Florent, not a small house nor a large one. However, Lord anger against the Tyrells after their ascension to Wardens of the South. They much preferred Naruto, however, Kevin liking his sly yet mischievous nature. Remin Sigil the Fox. Many of the men after that were of little importance, being the commanders of the Tyrell Guard and the Master of Ravens. Men both of which Naruto had forego. As Mace and Naruto walked into the tent, the once bickering men all fell silent and stood at the side of their liege lord. At a wave of his hand they all sat with Naru behind his father until Mace spoke up. Naruto, sit beside me, seeing as you have a large say in this discussion. He waved his hand and a wooden chair was brought over. Naruto looked over to his father as he sat down in the chair, shifting to become comfortable as Mace began the meeting. House tutor shall be one of the houses, including my own, to reprise lands in this tourney. He paused to gulp in a deep breath. Despite my utter hatred of the Dornishmen, Lord Tutor and his son as well as Lord Redwine have this. Mace returned to his seat and allowed the two men to take the stand. Eric Tudor began first. My fellow lords, the Dornishmen and the Northmen would be the best bet for allies in the upcoming years of turmoil. We all know the complacent and weak in years of gaining the rule and the defeat and humbling of the Greyjoys, no to mention how much influence those disgusting lions now. Destruction of my homeland. They've simply grown fat and complacent. It would be a perfect opportunity to gain more power and sooner or later wipe them out. History. At this the lords around the table began to mutter amongst themselves, mostly agreeing, however some still had their reservations. One of the lords, Kevin of Florent, spoke out. How are we supposed to achieve these alliances you speak of without backhand deals and gathering the ire of If we have Lord Tyrell marry his daughter off to one of the king's sons. At this both Naruto and Mei sat up. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the man, it seems they're as positive as he'd hoped. The man continued undaunted, after all the most powerful politics is that of lineage and childbirth. Through Joffrey we could have those bastard lions, he finished as he sat down. Wilhelm looked at him with disgust. Lord Florent, what you are proposing is an idea of immense foolishness. Not only would we have no contact with any child that is born in a union of the Rose, potentially lose any alliance that could be formed with the Dornishmen. Lord Redwine began, we could showcase the abilities of the South with Naruto tutor roles in the tourney, would show off the best of what we have to offer. This combined with Naruto wooing the Viper and Wolf's daughters, we would have a 2F. They'd be more than happy to agree to an alliance. At that Lord Redwine had finished and Naruto had spat out his drink. Naruto, after clearing the grog out of his throat, stood. Must I really seduce the daughters of both the Warden of the North and the Prince of the Sands? Will they of me when there are men better than I? Naruto finished with his shoulders slightly slumped. Naruto, my boy, Lord Mace began, you are truly a great man that my daughter loves without question. I have no doubt that the ladies of those great houses and get to know you, not to mention Sansa Stark is a redhead and Ariane Martell is a beautiful yet deadly woman of your age. With that Naruto sat down. Adjourned. We shall meet again after the tourney. With that Mace stood up and walked off. With that the men all stood and returned to their tents, each with them. The day of the tourney. The day of the Hands tourney had finally come. All the fighters had prepared themselves for combat. Naruto watched as the Hedge Knight of Mir had won the hour and a half of brutal hand-to-hand combat, as well as Engui of the East winning the archery contest. Something Naruto himself had never been too strong. Prepared himself for the joust, his squire ran about grabbing layers of plate armor and strapping them to Naruto's body. As this was being done, Naruto felt against his face and chest. He opened his eyes to see Margery's soft brown eyes staring up at him. Do not put yourself in too much risk, my love, she began. I love you too much to see you be killed by such simple men, she whispered, her eyes watering. Slig. Naruto lightly cupped her face and rubbed his thumb against her cheek. Do not worry, my love. No man here could harm me, much less kill me. Your beauty's radiant today. With that Naruto gave her a slight smile before kissing her lightly. She deepened the kiss, holding him tight. She gasped lightly when Naruto gripped his armored hands, his fingers sinking deep into her supple flesh. As she gasped, Naruto slipped his tongue into her mouth, swirling it around her own, in dominance before going back to exploring her mouth. She tastes like strawberries. Naruto thought. They finally pulled away from one another, chests heaving with exertion. That she paused. Was my gift to you, and this is a good luck charm. With that she took off her golden rose necklace and put it over his head. With this may themselves defeat you. As she did this she kissed his forehead and began to walk away. As Naruto watched her go, he called after her. Thank you, my lady, as long as you are there for me no challenge can defeat me. My love for you extinguishes all, he said as he watched her walk away, his eye with her hips. Naruto shook those thoughts free as he finished putting on his armor. This was bound to bring some attention. Line break. This tourney had been a mistake. It was almost too easy for someone of Naruto's caliber. He'd beaten nearly every man he'd engaged so far in the justs. Addition to this as well, one had been named Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto had wondered why they let such a whiny brat with a severe case of pink eye join the joust. Good that boy was when Naruto's lance had ended up deep in the boy's throat, ending whatever line the boy had been a part of. Rumors have it he was the law. Had been true, then Naruto had ended whatever crappy line had spawned him. Naruto shook these thoughts from his head. This was the last tilt of the tourney, him vs that Lannister mad dog. The mountain that rides, the beast of a man and Clegane. Naruto hated him with absolute passion. The man had no honor, he killed and raped without abandon while the Fat King did nothing, allowing those that were the Lannisters to get away with murder. No more, however. He would end that bastard here and now. Naruto was shaken from his thoughts when a large hand like paw rested upon his shoulder. Looking up he saw the smirking face of his father. He grinned up at. Single gold eye twinkled in happiness. My son, you've made me prouder now than ever before. If your mother was here at the tourney I have no doubt she'd say the same thing. Now you know WH. Allow us to begin reinstating our house's honor. Then we can slay those Lannister bastards and regain our homeland. As he said this, Naruto felt his heart soar his chest in pride as his father spoke. My son Eric began again, I have a couple gifts for you, to use in the last round of the joust. These are bound to cause a ruckus. He grinned at Naruto who lo. Confusion. Eric turned and brought forward the first gift, a new horse, a large one, much larger than his Frisian he'd used before. The horse had a reddish black eyes and Naruto could see the intelligence yet sheer rage they held. The horse was covered in sinewy yet powerful. It had a crimson mane that even now breeze of the tent, it was covered in a black barding with the gold and crimson rose of the Tudor house emblazoned on it. Naruto stood in awe of the beautiful, then spoke up again. His name is Red Hair, the fastest horse found this side of the Essos, straight bred from the watered horses of the Dothraki. However, this is not the only gift. Second will show everyone. And with that Eric opened the box that he had behind him. Naruto's eyes opened wide. Oh yeah, the Lannisters were going to hate this one. The mountain rode out crowds booed him, their hatred for the beast showing fervently. The massive bulk of a man rode an equally large man was as hated as. Acted like one too, raping and looting. The man was closer to an animal than that of a man. The man didn't think he had the Lannisters to do it for him, however. This would be his last battle. Naruto rode out. And the crowds went ballistic. Cersei Lannister sat straighter, her son Joffrey turned purple in rage, Robert laughed a huge bellowing laugh. And Sansa blushed. Oberyn grinned in pure spite and Arianne Martell tilted her head in curiosity. Naruto rode out upon Red Hair. He wore gold and black plate armor deckled with the vines and thorns of roses. On Naruto's chest sat a massive embossed G. His allegiance, it was his helmet however that drew the ire of the Lannisters. A lion's head formed the top half of the headdress, its long mane swayed in the breeze as Red Hair galloped forwards, the lion's lower jaws formed his chin strap. Was an ornate golden death mask, the mask showed the relief of his ancestor, and all who looked at it felt an innate primal fear crawling inside of them begging escape. In his right hand he held a gold lance, one that was tipped in silver and had a black lining. On his left hand he wore a black buckler shield lined with its center. He rode over to the start of the list and readied himself. Get on with it, I'm not aging any fucking slower you slow bastards, Robert shouted, chugging his beer. Cersei looked at him in disgust. With the sounding of a horn, the tilt started, Naruto and the mountain rushed at each other. Red Hair picked up speed quickly, closing the distance between high within a second. He couched his lance aiming directly for the mountain's gorget. The lance struck true, punching through the armor and almost striking the M. However, the mountain slipped. His horse lost its footing on the tilt, throwing him forward into the lance at an angle. The tip tore open a cut on the mountain's neck, punching through and out. Gorget, he crumpled. The crowd went wild. An explosion of cheers sounded throughout the stadium. Pride burst through his chest. He raised his arm in victory. The crowd went key. A groan, he stiffened. No, there's no way he could still be alive. The mountain rose once more. Gregor Clegane hadn't been killed just yet. Gregor ripped off his mangled helmet and gorget, his eyes blazed with untamed fury. His neck gushed a flood of blood. Bring me my blade, he roared. Naruto dismounted as a squire struggled to carry the mountain's gigantic bastard sword. The mountain wrenched it out of the, leaving him a skittering mess as he rushed back to the arena's entrance. The mountain turned to his horse, his rage skyrocketing as he watched the beast struggle to stand. He strode closer to the horse and lifted his blade. The crow. Shock, Ned covered Arya's eyes and the king's eyes grew wide. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he watched the scene playing out. The mountain brought down his blade with an avalanche of power. The humming blade severed the horse's head without any issue, cutting straight through th. Collapse. The nobles sat stony-faced, unnerved by the sheer anger and brutality of the mountain. The king stumbled and swayed as he stood. The winner of this joust is Naruto of House Tudor. Stop your yammering and get off the arena, he slurred as he slumped back into his chair. Cersei Lannister. She watched her slob of a husband. She felt a cold, heavy feeling settle on her. She turned to see what was causing this feeling. Her ocean blue eyes met the cold, furious gold eyes of one of the smaller one, the one that paraded in the head of her animal. She wouldn't stand for this. Kill him, tear his head from his body, she screamed as she rose, drawing the attention of all, including her husband. Woman, sit down before I force you to, Robert growled. That boy mocks my house and you wish for me to allow it like I allow you your whores. I will not, she hissed back. As Robert moved to enforce his order, the battle started anew. The mountain rushed Naruto, aiming to cut him from head to crotch in a single blow. The mountain's blade came down, and Naruto's shield deflected it. The mountain staggered off put by the blood loss and the power of the deflection. My weapon, bring me my weapon, Naruto roared, calling for his poleaxe. A servant heft the weapon and threw it. It hit the ground next to Naruto. The Mao. Again, this time Naruto was prepared. He kicked up the poleaxe into his awaiting hands and swung the beak of the weapon into his knee. The mountain buckled, and swung his fist, catching Naruto off guard and knocking him back. Naruto gave him no time to recover and charged him again, swing. Poleaxe into his chest, and with it sounded a resounding crunch. The mountain roared in pain and tried to raise his blade against Naruto, only for Naruto's axe fall upon it, breaking bone and pulverizing the flesh of the wrist to naught but mush. Naruto rained blow after blow onto the mountain, giving him no reprieve. The crowd grew wilder and wilder with each blow. Robert's eyes grew wider and wider, narrowed further. After 20 blows the mountain fell to his knees, broken and heavily wounded. Naruto stood before him, his poleaxe resting on his neck. For the crimes that you have committed against the common folk, the noble family of the Martells, and against your own kin, I deem you fit for execution. May your soul never find rest, and may the Watcher devour you in its entirety. With that, Naruto lifted his poleaxe and brought the weapon down, emulating the execution of his own animal. The blade tore through his neck, severing his head. Naruto lifted it to the roars of the crowd before gifting the head to Oberyn, who clasped his hand tightly. My friend, he whispered, you will be greatly rewarded for this. My family shall grant you any boon possible, he whispered excitedly. Naruto looked at him and grinned. Maybe I can think of something. Last time on the Reigns of Fire, for the crimes that you have committed against the common folk, the noble family of the Martells, and against your for execution. He paused for effect. May your soul never find rest, and may the Watcher devour you in its entirety. With that, Naruto lifted his poleaxe and bro down, emulating the mountain's execution of his own animal. The blade tore through his neck, severing his head. Naruto lifted it to the roars of the crowd before gifting the head to Oberyn, who clasped his hand tightly. My friend, he whispered, you will be greatly rewarded for this. My family shall grant you any boon possible, he whispered excitedly. Naruto looked at him and grinned. Maybe I can think of something. Present, the crowd had never been louder. Peasant men and women alike cheered and shouted. Streamers and flowers were thrown from the stands. Naruto stood in arms wide, accepting the cheer. Mace Tyrell stood in the stands, each his booming laughter and the clap of his large hands cut through the cheer of the crowd. Lord sat in complete befuddlement. Patir sat stewing the amount of gold he'd just lost to Renly, a man as hapless as a two-legged horse. Beside Renly sat a dark blue robe gilded with gold and sapphires. The man leaned forward slightly, showing off the gold bangles and rings that adorned his forearms and finger. Lightly, however, all those around him could feel his slightly off presence, and his height alone dwarfed the men next to him, sitting at 6 feet 9 inches. The man watched as his potbelly bouncing with the movement. Naruto moved to kneel in front of the king, his armor clanking and shivering with the movement, blood dripping off. Chest plate. The king's hand rose, his beet red face still heaving with the effort of standing. Your skill at arms during this tourney reminds me of myself during the rebellion. Strapping lad. I name you champion of the hands tourney. At that Eddard Stark scoffed. And as champion I shall both allow you one wish and allow you the honor of naming the next queen of love and beauty. With that the king then returned to huff. Naruto stood and stared Cersei directly into her frosty blue orbs, his own golden ones burning bright. His eyes then snapped back to the king's dark brown on. And pulled off his death mask revealing his youthful face to the crowd and the king. My liege, I cannot choose a wish so flippantly. If it is okay with the crown I would like some time to ponder upon the wish. He spoke lowly, false respect dripping. You just murdered a loyal retainer of my house. And you make requests pissant, you're lucky I don't ask for your head, a haughty voice responded Cersei. The woman's voice annoyed Naruto to no end, he was close to ending himself with a spear, but Robert spoke up. Shut your mouth, woman. The boy deserves it for killing your father's hound and wiping out the tourney's company, he slurred. Then he thought to himself, and only say that because he could have beaten your beloved twin. Bahaha, I would have loved to see that backbiter test his so-called mettle against a true warrior. Laugh. Cersei's face slowly grew purple with rage and embarrassment. She turned away, her face firmly set into scowl. Robert stood to continue. All right, now choose tea. Beauty already, so we can get to the drinks and whores, Robert shouted as a servant scurried forward with a crown of 9 white rose petals. Naruto stared at contemplation. He took it from the pillow the servant brought it upon. 3 people came to mind. But who could he give it to? Why should I only give it to one? All these thoughts came to mind. Naruto then had an idea talked about for centuries after. He cut the roses into 3 groups of 3, wrapping them using the stems and leather strings from his armor. Naruto then made a decision. First he walked. Martel. My lady, may I place this upon you, he said, his and Ariane's eyes meeting, her seductive curiosity drawing him in like a viper into its nest, after what felt like out her hand. You may, good sir. Who could have presumed that such simple words would have such an effect? Naruto placed the first trio of roses upon her silky olive Colorado. Her arm and seductively traced her finger along his jawline before winking one dark chestnut-colored eye at him. Naruto stepped away from her, winking his own eye and giving her a large smirk, nodding to Oberyn, who smiled slyly, looking from him to Ariane. Naruto then. Next queen. He stopped in front of her, staring deep into her cool blue eyes, reminding him of a calm ocean, a far cry from Cersei's frosty ones. The crowd around. Confusion and awe as Naruto spoke again. My lady, may I place this upon you? Naruto uttered the same phrase, this time to a different reaction. His chosen blushed hotly and looked to her father, then grinned a wolfish smile. You may. Thank you, sir. With that Naruto crowned the second queen of love and beauty. Sansa Stark. Her red hair sat in a crown braid, beautiful and vibrant. Skin, almost unblemished bar a sprinkle of freckles across her nose and cheeks, looked like a living porcelain doll. Equal to the beauty of any at the tourney. Naruto. Fleeting kiss upon her knuckles before relinquishing her arm. He looked over to Ned Stark, who nodded to him. Naruto nodded back, a sign of respect between warriors. Sansa herself looked to be in a dreamlike state as into the center of the arena. The tension was thick in the air as he still had a single bundle of roses remaining. Naruto locked eyes with his first love, his first beloved, and began to walk toward her. The roses in his hands seemed to almost glow as they approached the Margery Tyrell herself. Naruto placed the white roses upon her arm. The crowd exploded. Even the king himself seemed sober enough to be shocked by the put in place. He then kissed her knuckles in a polite gesture, smiling widely at her. She returned the smile and winked seductively at him, almost driving him over there and then. Mace leaned over and patted Naruto on the shoulder, smiling widely before leaning over to whisper in his ear, beware of the Prince M. boy, he seems to have tack. Your maidens with that he pulled away watching Naruto's usually honey gold eyes darken into a sickly yellow, he looked over his shoulder only to spot the prin. Sansa and Margery. He'd not let that mongrel anywhere near his beloved, nor a woman that had caught his attention. He'd sooner strip the hide from the boy's body and use it as. Eyes met his own and Joffrey shivered in fear. The boy's father stood once again. And now time for the feast, he bellowed. Grabbing the nearest maid and began to plod toward the Red Keep, the King's Guard and Cersei following close, more reluctant than the former. Her brother Jaime sent a smirk in Naruto's direction, however that smirk disappeared when he realized Naruto gave him no min. Returned to the side of Sansa and had struck up a conversation with the girl, the man stormed off as he finally caught Naruto's eye and the vicious smile sent. Spine. As Naruto talked to Sansa, telling her about his life in the Reach, someone caught his eye. The man in the hood and gilded robes was turned in his direction. And the man's hooded head shifted to the side, nodding toward the tunnel that led back to the armory, nodding yet slightly suspicious. Naruto started to mo. Sansa looked up at him in slight curiosity. My lady, I must be on my way to prepare myself for the coming feast, however much I wish to stay and bask in your. That Naruto nodded at Lord Stark, receiving his own nod in return. He walked off, leaving a bemused Eddard and blushing Sansa. As Naruto walked into the armory, he stopped. Looking around, he felt as if he was being watched. The armory around him was empty, yet he could still feel a. Show yourself, I know you're here, Naruto called out to the seemingly empty room. In a dark corner behind him a familiar tall figure stepped out. His long dark blue robes were covered in gems and gold lining. Naruto remembered him as the Fig. The man looked over at Naruto and slowly approached him. It was then Naruto realized the man's height. He was easily almost the same height as the Mounta. Shorter, yet he carried a grace not seen by men of lower stature. He simply glided across the floor toward Naruto and stopped a couple meters away from him. Long jewel-covered hand and slowly removed the hood from his face. The man was pale as snow. His hair was a dark deep black, almost as if it were swallowing the light around it. The man's eyes were an emerald green, a piercing on his nose. My name is Doran the Forge Master. One of the last left since the fall of Castamere. With that, Naruto stiffened and stared at the man. Explain. Naruto said, his voice was firm and frigid. I am one of many known as the Numenorians, known as the Sea Kings. We lived west of the Iron Isles and were some of the best shipbuilders and warriors. Oh, many summers ago the Iron Islands rebelled against my people and slaughtered many of us and took many more as slaves. With this he paused, and Naruto. The man's facade. He continued, they trapped us within our island and our allies, including your ancestor Richard Lionheart Rain fought tooth and nail with the original lords of Casterly's to send aid. However, it was too late, and we'd already been massacred. Now however we been able to leave, and by hearing the massacre the mad we'd feared no red lions were left. Coming to this tourney I was simply wishing to find those to start trade with, and I found the last of the red lions, the Manti. Grin. How did you know? Naruto whispered lowly. Not many here remember the features of my house. Doran smiled wryly. One never forgets the lion once its claws have been seen, he replied cryptically. He then widened his eyes slightly as if he'd just remember. Have a message from my lord, read it when you can. He will be awaiting a raven soon. With that, Doran threw him a scroll and then removed a large object from wrapped in a fine silk. The object was almost as long as Naruto himself and was skinny, almost like a spear. Doran unwrapped it to reveal a beautiful gold and silver double-tipped blade-edged lance-like spear. The blade was a swirl of gold and silver. Doran looked. Naruto weapon forged of Numenorian gold and Valyrian steel, forged and intertwined together to make a powerful weapon. Doran span the lance a handful of times. The jaw dropped. Prince, a gift from my lord. The name he gave it was Dawn Piercer, however you may name it what you like. With that the man bowed and begged. Pausing. Be wary of the she-lion, for she sees more than you are led to believe. Doran finally walked out of the armory and disappeared. As he did so, Naruto continued. Piercer. He hefted up and spun it, letting the sunlight sparkle across its lavish features. I think I'm going to rename you Astur, Godslayer. Naruto spoke to the spear as he grinned to himself. He then began to take off the dented armor. Wincing moved. The mountain's punches had left some horrible bruising. Too bad the adrenaline had finally worn off, as peeling away the armor became harder and hot. Of the day finally getting to Naruto, he sat down on the bench behind him, laid on his back, resting for the intense evening to come. Evening of the feast. Noble men, women, and peasants alike streamed toward the Red Keep. Within the castle's enormous curtain walls sat numerous long feasting tables, which were Central Table, where the royal family sat. Robert, accompanied by a maid on his lap to his left. He and her dueled for dominance within the battleground. Of her right hand sat a large tankard of alcohol. To his right, Cersei tried her best to ignore her husband's whoring as she doted upon her firstborn son, the crown pr. To her right, and who at this moment was trying his best to strike up a conversation with the uncomfortable-looking Sansa Stark. This was the scene Naruto came across as he entered the gates of the wall and strolled toward the main table. He wore a blood-red jerkin with golden roses the collar. Beneath the jerkin he wore a black shirt with more gold embroidered on the wrist. He wore with them black pants and carried a seeks at his hip. On champion laurel, and around his feet walked his hounds. They were almost as large as fully grown hunting hounds at this point, despite being a mere 3 months. The hound's Shiba padded forward, a chain collar of silver and iron around her neck. She was closely followed by her brothers Ramses and Achilles, each yipping. Nobles they strolled past, following behind their master. Naruto moved and stood in front of the king's table. He awkwardly bowed to the still engaged king. He then turned to the queen and stared her directly in the orbs narrowed as she stared at him. Down, Naruto bowed completely before backing down away from the monarchs. He could still feel the cold orbs on his back. Down in between Sansa and Margery, who, as daughters of the Hand and the Warden of the South respectively, deserved a seat at the royal table alongside Th. Down, Naruto gently kissed the hand of the redhead, causing her to blush brightly and curtsy. He then did the same action with Margery, taking her dainty hand. Laying a soft kiss upon her knuckles, Margery blushed lightly and smiled up at Naruto as he slowly sat down. "Hail to the champion of the tourney, have you thought of a wish, boy?" the king shouted above the crowd, finally separating himself from the maid. The crow quieted down as Naruto stood up. "My king, the only things I wish for are a long life, a beautiful wife, and a couple hundred dragons to spend in a whorehouse." With that proclamation, Naruto Gr. Tanker and chugged it, most if not all the beer falling down his gullet. Around him the men cheered and began drinking themselves. The band in the corner of Th. to strike a jaunty tune, and men and women all around the table got up to dance. Margery and Sansa both held a dog on each lap, petting them lightly and watching Naruto arm wrestle knights and drink in front of the king. Sansa turned to looked at her in slight curiosity. "I've been thinking, my father wishes me to be wed to the crown prince, and while he is lovely, he just doesn't seem to radiate the same confidence." Lord Naruto, "I'm still unsure." Sansa whispered over to the Princess of Flowers, nodded in understanding. She turned to her slightly younger peer. "I can understand how you feel to an extent. After all, I was mean to be married to the prince. However, my father." They both watched Mace Tyrell and the object of their conversation start a drinking competition, each taking 4 tankards of the beer and chugging them down. Ahead by 2 tankards, yet the Lord of Flowers was steadily catching up, his experience aiding him greatly. Margery continued the conversation, ignoring the rambling shouts of her father for more beer and the loud laughs of the king. "My father made sure to create Naruto's father, Lord Eric Tudor. We been around each other since birth, so it would have made more sense for us two to be wed, rather than any of my less comment." She sent a small glance at the prince, who was staring at Sansa. His longing gaze was deeply unsettling for both of them. She turned away before she Joffrey's eye. Naruto seemed to sense their immediate unease and returned to their side. As he walked over, he saw something out of the corner of his eye. The prince. The Staring at Sansa, as Naruto sat down between the two, he moved his arms around both beauties, laying a kiss on both of their cheeks. He enjoyed watching T. Anger, but even he knew he couldn't continue to annoy the prince, especially with how his mother behaved. Naruto almost didn't hear the king call him up. It took Margery elbowing him in his side for him to jump up and move toward the king. Stumbling forward and loose kneel as he waited for the king's next proclamation, the fat man wasted no time in chugging down another tankard of ale as the maid he was once swap his lap. He pushed the woman off before taking a deep breath. With that, the crowd quieted out, even the drunks understanding this was a momentous event. "Someone bring me my fucking sword, you idiots." The king paused to wait for one of his king's guard to give him the royal blade, his face red with annoyance. "Eric Tudor, in the name of the gods above and as king of the Undulls and the first men, I knight thee, Sir Naruto Tudor." With that, the king tapped his blade on. Nodding in satisfaction, he then breathed out a sigh and leaned forward. "Now onto the major business, Sir Naruto." He paused to gulp in some air his massive with exertion. He continued, undaunted by Cersei's disgusted yet curious glare around them. The crowd was as quiet as possible, all curious to what the king would. The king continued, "I, Sir Naruto, offer you a place on my king's guard as one of my personal bodyguards to protect and serve me and my family." At which throughout the entirety of the crowd, Mace Tyrell and Eric Tudor stood immediately, their eyes locking onto their young ward. Margery still seemed calm, however, stroking the Sheba's fur, seemingly calm. Next to her, Sansa was the complete opposite, fear and sadness clearly obvious in both her eyes, and her slightly shack seemed to pick up her fear and lightly whimpered, snuggling into her warmth, trying its best to ease her worries. Jaime Lannister tightly gripped his blade, his hands shaking ever so slightly and his eyes narrowing to thin slits. His sister, however, wasn't so tactful. "What do you think you're doing, Robert?" she hissed, not so different from a hissing basilisk. "You would entrust the safety of my children to this beast?" she said. In her voice was palpable, almost stinging Robert himself. The man reared back. Pure rage was visible in his cherry red face. "Woman, if you know what's good for you, you will shut your mouth," he roared back at her, spittle flying with every word. She stood tall. "I will not. This man would rather slit our throats than serve us, I know this for a fact." The sound of a hand meeting flesh rang loud, silencing all those around them. Cersei's head was turned at a sharp angle, her pale cheek red from the blow. Outstretched in a slapping motion, the woman turned to the man and her sneer returned full force. "I will wear this as a badge of honor," she said, her voice of a snake. "Wear it in silence or I shall honor you again." "Woman," Robert retorted, his loud voice carrying across the courtyard. Cersei growled in anger and returned to he. Volcanic anger was not quenched by Robert's unrighteous hand. Naruto in the meanwhile had become highly uncomfortable all of a sudden, being the cause of the slight marital scuffle, now that all eyes had returned to him. Just to spite the queen, who apparently hated him so intensely that she would accept the blow and continue to argue, despite the king threatening her. He'd made up his mind, he would be no man's pawn. "My king, I apologize for any disrespect. However, I must decline. I have much to do before I can pledge myself to your protection," Naruto told him, his voice low. The king slumped back into his throne, a heavy sigh escaping his bearded mouth. The man waved Naruto off and the boy moved away from the royal family. "See!" stormed off her handmaidens, struggling to keep up behind the ferocious lion. The members of the feast now awkwardly shuffled away, the drunk members be. Eddard watched the Tyrell group leave, Mace Tyrell leaning on the shoulder of his retainer, Eric, the same man whose singular now stared into his own. The man, his son and the daughter of the South walk side by side. The boy's hounds follow him loyally. Eddard Stark approached his liege and stood beside his throne. The tired man seemed to age almost 4 times within a mere second. Robert turned to his hand. "It is time that we finally unite our houses. It was supposed to happen with me and your sister." He paused, his voice taking on a saddened tone despite the alco. "His body, but that bastard dragon had to steal her away from me." There is not a day that goes by that I do not miss her and curse him. Robert was freely cry. Nodded in understanding, his own eyes misting up slightly. Robert looked back to Eddard. Your eldest daughter, she is the same age as the crown prince. They'd make a couple worthy of the first kings. A powerful unio. Houses. Eddard nodded. I'd have to speak to my daughter first, however, I believe she knows her duty. Although the Tyrells may have something to say about that. He was cut off. I am their king, no matter their power they must listen to me. Eddard, I need you to promise me something. Robert suddenly changed the flow of the converse. Of his friend and bringing him close. If I die, protect my family. Please, the Game of Thrones is dark and dangerous. Eddard nodded. I will do what I can, I swear it. At that the two friends shook hands and began to write up the marriage accords. Not knowing that it would change everything. The Roses Inn. Naruto was sitting up in his room. They had returned to the inn almost an hour ago. Outside he could hear the guards making their rounds. He was patting Do. When he felt an object strapped to the back of one of the pant legs, he reached around and gripped it tightly, pulling it around only to find that it was a small pea. Inside. Taking out the letter, he opened the bag to find a letter sealed with wax, and on the wax laid a symbol. The symbol of a heart gripped in an iron gauntlet. He knew no house that had such a symbol. He opened the letter to find a message. Now he remembered This must be the house that Lord Doran mentioned, he thought to himself. The letter began. Sir Naruto, son of Eric Tudor, grandson of Elaric the Red Lion, descendant of Richard the Lionheart Casterly. My ancestors spoke only of how great the Lion houses were. When my house was forced back and almost destroyed, it was your people who sent us supplies and aid. I am once again asking for your support. Ships can only last so long. Right now, we have them at a stalemate. Houses Greyjoy, Orkwood, Harlaw, and Myra are against us, the first three being among powerful on the Iron Isles. The rest of the houses bar House Goodbrother and House Valmark watch on, waiting to see who comes out on top. Those two loss named are aiding us the best they can, however, by the day it grows more and more perilous. Please, we are in dire need of your aid, whatever you can spare. A small detachment of ships will be waiting at the Fair Isle. They can only wait so long. The lion's claws are always sharp. Signed, Malekith, Lord of the Numenorians. Naruto sprinted out of his room. His weariness all but forgotten, he rushed down the halls of the inn toward his father's room. Reaching the door, he slammed. Beat on the door. It was flung open by his father, who wore a black-studded brigandine. In his right hand sat his trusty bastard sword, Thorn Splitter. What is it, my son? The man asked, confused. Naruto gave him the letter and watched as the man read it, his eyebrows slowly rising. When he got to the end, I narrowed. He looked up at Naruto. When did you get this message? He asked as he opened the door further and left the room, striding further down the from one of the Numenorians themselves. He also gave me a spear as a gift for winning the tourney. Naruto answered seriously, understanding how intense gather the lords. I shall go to Lord Mace. We prepare for war. At that they separated. It had been roughly half an hour since Eric and Naruto had read the letter. Nearly all the lords of the Reach sat around the war table in the large room within. The woken abruptly or had been already awake preparing for the next day. Most were in sleepwear, while very few sat in robes and light leathers. They all were talking themselves. Lord Redwine, Tarly and Florent sat beside each other, all three silent as stone statues. Beside them sat a new arrival, Lord Edward Hightower, one who was the brother of the Southern Warden's wife, a grave yet noble man. Naruto stood off to one side waiting for his father and his liege to arrive. As he was thinking about his father, the man marched in, followed by Mace and a hand, as well as Olenna Tyrell, the old woman hobbling proudly behind Mace. Randall scoffed seeing the old women enter the room. This is no place for a woman. Why is she? He was cut off by a dismissive wave from the old woman. I may be old, but I still have the sharpest mind within the room, bar two. Or do I need to remind you of your apparent win against Robert all those years ago? The man clammed up and tsked looking away. Edward laughed loud at the man being shut down. Why have you called us here, Eric? With that the ever-serious Redwine Lord began the meeting. Eric cleared his throat and began, my son received a message, from the Iron Islands and the surrounding archipelago. He was cut off as Kevin Florent sneered. The Iron Isles, why should we worry ourselves with the actions of those bastards and cutthroats? We should let them all rot for the hell they've given us. He. Highly evident. Some of the lesser lords nodded with this sentiment, their wars with the Ironborn still laying fresh within their minds. Eric turned to the angry lord, his cold singular eye wilting the opposing lord slightly. Despite our hatred of the Ironborn, the letter we received isn't directly from the Ironborn but an offshoot of the original Sea Kings. The Numenorians, NANC. That of the Undals and the First Men, they warred for centuries with those of the West. My people, the Casterlies, and the Ancient Rains. In the days of the Red Third, we came to an agreement to fight off and subjugate the men of the Iron Isles and the North. This agreement became an alliance, and this alliance became the peoples till the Iron Isles rebelled, led by the Grey Irons and Greyjoys. He paused to let the information sink in. The lords and ladies around the table nodded, though some looked annoyed by the history lesson. Eric continued, "Und. It was then the Lannisters' first betrayal occurred. They vetoed us aiding the Numenorians and forced us to watch as they were driven back. Our allies forced I." Finished, his voice low and sad. "Thank you for the history lesson, but why again should we aid these people when they have done nothing for us?" Lord Tarly asked, his face fixed into a scowl. At this point Naruto stepped forward. "We should aid them because they can help us, they have an army and a navy, they have influence, with their aid the West become home that much easier. We all hate the Lannisters but no one more than my family," he finished, pointing to himself. The lords around the table nodded. Sentiment, however, they were still skeptical. What could they offer us bar arms and wealth? What could they offer you when you do retake your place within the West? Olena finally asked, breaking through. Around the table, Naruto stepped forward. His father turned to him, questioning the movement. He looked at his father and nodded. The man stepped back. "Lady Olena, what? Support. Not only military support, but political support. Having the entirety of the Iron Islands under our control, even through an ally, gives us massive political. But the relations between Dorne and ourselves with the Starks give us an unstoppable position. Even the king himself wouldn't dare defy us," he finished. Looking. Olena sat forward and beckoned Naruto over. The young man walked over to her, and she grasped his hand. She reached over and took a gold ring off her placed it within his palm. The lords around the table all looked at the scene before them in shock, knowing well what the gesture meant. Naruto looked at the ring. Was embossed with a rose and dragon, indicative of the past relations. "With this ring I give you my blessing." With that she left the room, followed by two men at arms. Naruto stood stiff, shocked by the women's declaration. His the back, he turned to the man and saw his grinning visage. "You've got the Queen of Thorns' approval, my boy," he said jovially. Then he turned to the rest of the lords. "What will it be? Who will support my son's endeavor? Has the soldiers and ships of my house. Who else shall aid the future king in the West?" he roared. A cheer went out amongst the lords. Lord Redwine stood, his dark gaze peering into Naruto's very soul. He continued to stare as Naruto looked back at him, as the man stood eye to eye with him. Clashed with Willow's brown, almost black eyes. A small predatory smile broke through the man's stony facade. "So, when are we hunting some squids then, boy?" "My ships are yours," the man proclaimed, outstretching his hand. Naruto shot the man a cheeky grin and cla. Another man then stood tall, then another, until all the lords in the room bar two. Lord Mace Tyrell and Lord Randall Tarly, one was watching his vassals prepare war while the other maintained a stony look, revealing nothing. Finally Mace Tyrell stood. "My mother gave her permission, my lords gave their aid, what could a man do but agree? I give my support on one condition: if you win, if you gain the Sapo Islands, I will let you marry my daughter. If we lose and my ships and men are lost, you will be condemned, and Margery will be married to either a Lannister or. Know this well. The man finished his message by giving Naruto another gold ring, this one embossed with a tower and a rose. Naruto nodded a grim smile str. Face. Randall Tarley stood, his short stature betraying nothing. My house serves the Tyrells willingly, with no complaint. This is a foolish endeavor, however I shall owe enough to aid you. The man then retired back to his room. The good mood was then ruined when two Tudor guards burst into the room, each dragging an individual. My lord, the first one spoke, Naruto and his father too. We caught these spies outside, my lord, both carrying messages addressed to the queen and the spider. Kill them both, then dump the bodies into a river. We must leave as soon as possible. Lord Florent, can we depend on you to remain here with Lord Tyrell? Keep sight, they're dangerous. Eric told the men preparing to leave. All the remaining lords all nodded and returned to their rooms. When Naruto arrived at his room, paper out and began to write, knowing he wouldn't see Margery for a long while, he began to write. 2 weeks later. Travel had been long and boring. The lords of the Reach had taken a ship from the Crown Lands under the cover of night, sneaking out the day before the kings. Redwine had sent a raven ahead to prepare the fleet and soldiers for the journey to the Iron Isles. When they'd arrived, almost 100 ships had been prepped from nearly every house within the Reach. Tudor forces formed the vanguard of the invasion fleet, bringing 20 ships and 3,000 men. The flagship of the Tudor vanguard was the Iron Rose, a huge warship easily the size of any Greyjoy raider. It had a single mast, and 5 huge canvas sails at easy. Aboard the ship was made from pure red oak and gold roses formed a ram at the front of the ship. Aboard the ship, the lords leading the invasion stood on. Was the captain of the Tudor fleet. Beside him stood Lord Edward Hightower, the tall man leaning against the railings of the Iron Rose. Naruto stood tall next to ship as the fleet exited the arbor heading toward the meeting point. The Tudor force left first to form a bridgehead, their forces being the best equipped for pursuit. Naruto, his father, called out, "Come here, we have much to discuss." The young teen rushed up to the quarter deck to his awaiting father, the man, and the OT around the wheel of the ship. "My boy, the plan that has been laid out is this. You will take a force of 400 men and meet up with Malekith on Pike while the rest clear out the enemy on the Great Wick and Old Wick," Eric told him. Naruto nodded along, but then a confused expression fell across his face. "Father, what of the Tyrell fleet? What will they do?" he asked. His father nodded and laid a map out on the floor. "The Tyrell fleet is coming to hold back the Greyjoy and other Ironborn forces, as well as to maintain garrison in the areas we do take," he said, getting an unday. The Yonguzmiak no. The fleet so far had been making good time. The ships had taken a wide berth around Lanny Sport, the eyes of the Lannisters and their bows aimed firmly in the crossed through the Golden Sound with no incident. Their ships maintained the course. If only everything could be so simple. A huge storm washed through. Waves tossed ships around like a child having a tantrum. The ships continued to push through rain and waves pounding the decks and washing any soul to FO. Each trough threw the ships into deep valleys, while every wave forced them upwards, each struggling to climb the mountains of water. One ship started to falter, then another and another. The entire fleet struggled to climb the wave. Eric looked back, his worried gaze washing over the rest of Worry, men, we've almost crested. Keep a close formation and we'll be. Eric was cut off by a loud crash of thunder and the strike of lightning. It illuminated S. Left. Many things. Ships. Warships portside, 15 in total. A shout sounded from the crow's nest. Eric turned to port, eyes squinting, trying to catch a glimpse. The lightning struck again. Ships approaching them. Friend or foe? He called up to the crewman in the nest. The man peered out again, catching a glimpse of gold. The Kraken. The foe has appeared, he called back down, his voice trembling slightly. Eric cursed. He prayed to the gods for salvation. Arianne missed him. She missed the boy that had given her the rose that even now remained on her arm. Even though they had spoken so briefly, and she still missed him. So when it was made known that she had received a letter from both him and Margery Tyrell, she knew something was amiss. The letter had been long, and it within her heart, a fire that now drove her to her father's chambers. "Father, I must speak with you now," she said. Her voice was strong and demanding. Prince Doran raised his hand, his attention firmly placed upon some reports on his desk. This drew her curiosity. After roughly 30 seconds he finally looked up. Sullen. "Daughter, I'm sorry, but anything you have to tell me has to wait till I have spoken with the War Council. If what I am reading is true, war may be on the horizon." Lo. He began to wheel himself from behind the desk, but Ariane stood before him, refusing to move. Her face, a mask of both concern and annoyance. "You must listen, father, it is most likely related to what you are going to discuss with your council. It is from Naruto, winner of the tourney, and it's highly impo. It? I will not move until you do so," she finished. The man stared her down, his dark eyes piercing through her own. They stayed that way for what felt like a millennia, till he finally huffed, opening his palm. She watched him read the letter, his eyes skimming but growing wider with each sentence. Then his eyes narrowed. "And why, pray tell, should I send my forces to aid this upstart who shall defend the homeland? You may be infatuated with the boy and respect him, but I do not believe he is worth the effort or men. Father, he will be a man of powerful standing if this works. He will have the backing of 4 houses, and if we include our own, we'd be untouchable." The man W. Annoyance now palatable. Enough on this topic. Even if he can land on the Iron Islands, there's no way in hell he would be able to hold it even with the best of his forces. The storms wi. Pirates will do worse. Now begone from my sight, I must ready myself for the War Council, he finished, his voice strong and unyielding. Ariane stormed out, her eyes watering and her mind reeling. She wondered how her father could be so close-minded. As she stomped through the garden, Uncle calling her over. Having nothing to do and nothing else to lose, she walked over. "Walk with me." They walked side by side for a while, walking across the long balconies. Then he spoke. "I overheard your conversation with my brother, little Ni. Side of the bigger picture easily, don't you think?" She nodded furiously, her anger at her father's decision still at the forefront of her mind. "It is for this reason why many of our bannermen do not like him. They view him weak, as close-minded and focused only upon revenge on the Lannisters. So that he does not see our greatest weapon against the Lannisters. That boy you're infatuated with," as he finished, looking over at her. She looked away, a slight blush spreading across her face. "But what are we to do? Father will not send any forces to aid him." Oberyn slyly smiled. "Well, my little niece, while Doran may be the Prince of Dorne, but he does not have the favor that I do. Fighting in the pits gives one man enemies," he then muttered to himself for a couple of seconds before looking back at her. "I could possibly ask House Atreides and House Fowler to spare some of their better ships to send," at which Ariane grabbed her uncle into a bone-creaking hug. Little did they know that this minor action would change the flow of the war completely. Line break. The iron rose and fell, its massive bow cutting through the stormy-ridden seas, almost unbothered by the sea's will to drag it to the depths. Around it followed behind like a pack of voracious wolves. Within the formation sat the transport ships, each carrying 500 men apiece. The 3 ships struggled to climb mountain-like waves, their crews scurrying about on their decks, tying down loose weaponry and trying their best to hold. They crested the hill of immense WATE. Parts of the fleet following them as other sections of the fleet followed the Iron Rose in the opposite direction, the massive warship moving to engage the Onco. The entire fleet altogether outnumbering the oncoming Greyjoy forces. Most of the warships were sent with the transports to ensure they weren't ambushed. "Prepare yourselves, men, let us gut these iron-born trash and show them the wrath of the Tudors." Eric himself roared, his voice carrying across and through Storm itself, the men cheered with him, their rage and wrath flowing out into the storm. The storm itself seemed to abate, the strength of the men's roar seemingly pushing it back only for it to strike back with a vengeance. The winds billowing and lightning cracking the sky itself as if the wrath of the gods had been summoned to this battlefield. Naruto stood at the helm of the Iron Rose, his hair matted down by the strength of the wind, his golden eyes piercing through the haze. His father stood next. Helm itself. They watched as the Greyjoys grew closer. It was obvious the raiders were trying to split the formation down the center and engage one portion A. Orders, father. Naruto called out to his father over the drums of war and the rolling thunder. The man turned to his son, regarding him with a feral grin. Allow them to get closer, the Rose has a surprise they'll be surely happy to accept. The blazing glint in the man's eye almost terrifying Naruto, shrugging it off. His own devilish smile. Well then, let us greet our new friends in kind then, father. As the ship began racing forward, nothing could stop it, neither gigantic waves nor whirlpools, it simply crashed through them. The wood and iron hull creaking. Every blunt impact. They drew closer and closer to their enemies. They could almost smell the raiders. Once they had practically reached ramming distances, two things happened. Rose at the front of the ship opening slightly, a nozzle just about visible from the dark hole. The second were three large ballistae being unhooked from the floor. The front, the other two on each flank. Each capable of piercing through a ship's side as easily as an arrow through a hair. They drew into 100 yards of the ships. The Greyjoys started to fire a hail of arrows at the Tudor fleet. Most missed, however, the dull thuds of bodies hit. Still highly apparent. Hold on my mark, fire the ballistae, Eric Tudor roared, the ballista operators shouting back in confirmation. The Greyjoys closed their large raiding ships practically on top of the Iron Rose. It was then Eric smiled. Fire the ballistae, and all hell broke loose. The massive bolt sprang forth, its barbed head piercing straight through the port side of the Greyjoy raider, splitting the ship in half. The massive iron head ran wood to naught but splinters and chunks. The second ship got off even worse. The Iron Rose's sister ships, the Defiant, slammed into its starboard side, its sharpened gold ram crushing the flank and PR raider over with its sheer velocity. However, more poured over the massive swells, forming and pushing everything like an angered god. A grey iron ship slammed into the side of the cloudless sky, one of the smaller Tudor ships. Boarding planks were dropped, and they rushed the crew, and Mari watched from the deck as the Marines clashed with the raiders. Each man took down at least 2 raiders before he fell, their superior training put to the test by T. Numbers. Captain, turn us to the cloudless sky, I wish to aid them repel their boarders, Naruto ordered. The captain was just about to repeat his orders when his father. Naruto, I know you wish to help everyone, however we cannot aid them and put ourselves into a dangerous position. Our duty is to find their flagship and after that they should scatter and run, the mongrels they are. Clenching his teeth tightly, he watched as the Tudor Marine fought, undaunted by the number of enemies and lack of support. The Iron Rose pushed on, crushing another 2 ships with its massive ballista. The ship turned to face east, something catching Eric's eye. And he saw it there. Of the battlefield, a larger ship sat waiting, almost strategizing. Eric now understood their flagship had not been in the thick of it like it should have, the raiders' edge of the battle, waiting to pounce on the unsuspecting transport fleet. Eric would not allow that to come to pass. Naruto grabbed a longbow from one of the passing arms men, taking 2 arrows and preparing himself to fight. Father, allow me to take the head of the Grey. These dogs into the sea. The man nodded with pride swelling in his chest at the thought of his son's triumph. Take his head, and bring it to me. Naruto nodded in response, a savage. His face as he grabbed a boarding axe and hammer. The Iron Rose preyed upon the smaller Greyjoy ship like an orca on a seal. The massive bulk of the ram slammed into the side of the Greyjoy flagship, the Risal. The first blow sent 2 members of the crew overboard, and 1 more was crushed beneath the weight-wrought gold ram. Naruto was the first to leap over onto. Flourishing his axe and hammer, Landing on the deck, he was charged by 2 Greyjoy oarsmen, their clothes ragged and torn, their faces worn and weary with were missing. But it mattered not. The first man had his head smashed in like a ripe melon, his brains splattering across the deck. The second man was more his charge. However, Naruto gave him no time to think. Rushing the man, he swung the axe in an upward arc. The man had enough sense of mind to lean back slightly, lightly kiss his collarbone. The Greyjoy swung his own boarding axe, aiming to remove Naruto's head from his body, only for the hand to be shattered by a bac hammer. The poor sop screamed till his head was removed from his body. Naruto continued through the ship, flanked by his father and Edward Hightower, each man bathed in blood as they cut through the crew of the ship, their targe. The Greyjoy captain, who stood surrounded by his bodyguard on the quarter deck, he was a Weasley-looking man, just about able to hold a sword. "Surrender now, or you will be killed, and your body will be desecrated," Naruto's father called out to the man, just about audible over the storm around them. Anger pointing at the 3 men as all around them, the ship was being boarded and overrun by Tudor troops. "You fools involved yourself in a war that wasn't your own. You decided to come into the territory of the drowned god and demand me to surrender? I'd wrath tongue and piss on your mother." The men around him either laughed or snarked in anger. Eric's eyes flashed with anger and he was about to charge, till he saw his son. Naruto's eyes were a sickly gold, his knuckles were white around the weapon's edge. Jumped in his jaw. Naruto slowly started toward the group, his father and Edward following behind. 4 guards rushed them, swinging their better-made trio. Naruto ducked under the first swing and blocked the second, sinking a kick into the chest of the raider, sending him flying with a crunch of ribs. His cries ended with a crunch as Naruto crushed his throat with a heavy stomp. The second raider was intercepted by Lord Hightower, the enormous man swiftly stepping toward the raider, deftly swinging his great sword across the man's one half fell over the rail, the other half was kicked into the third man, sending him stumbling and cursing. This was put to an end when an axe lodged itself. The last man had already been killed, cut from brain to balls in a single swipe by Naruto's father, his blade slicing through the man like a hot knife through fat. The last of the captain's bodyguards wearily looked on, seeing their allies be cut down like wheat before a scythe. The last 2 pushed the now panicking captain, diving over the side before the Tudor troops could get a hold of them. "Why you don't have to kill me? I have information that can be used against the man's stuttered words were cut off as his knee was the ground and screamed as Naruto stomped down on it. "You will tell us everything. And then we will let you go," Naruto told him. The man looked behind him to see the rest of his fleet aflame. None had survived, to the front of several of their warships. "Fine, I'll tell you everything, just let me go." Naruto seemed to ponder this for a moment before nodding. "We can do that, just make sure you leave out nothing." The man began to speak, all the secrets he'd learned under the employ of the Golden Kraken. 2 days later, the Tudor fleet had rendezvous with the detachment of Numenorian ships, who were surprised to see the new ornamentations on their allies. The bodies of been chained to the front of any of their warships, including the flagship itself. Chained to the front of the Iron Rose itself was the captain of the Resolute Silence, Meyer. Upon seeing this, the entire crews of the 3 ships had let out a cheer at the death of the infamous raider. After a small break, the entire fleet had made way again, this time at an almost breakneck pace toward the Iron Isles. The weather had been a godsend. Complete way through the final leg of the journey, a far cry from the almost apocalyptic storms earlier into the trip, and they'd made good headway and were practically Iron Isles by midday. Naruto prepared himself to move over to his new flagship, the Red Dawn. His ship and one of the transport ships alongside 3 others were to head toward Pike. Enemy there alongside Malekith, as his father had explained. However, he knew it wasn't going to be so simple. And as such he gripped his father's arm in RESP, giving the man a warm hug. "May we see each other again, father, in victory or in death," Naruto said as he boarded his ship, followed closely by two lesser lords. Eric nodded at his son Reap. "In victory or in death." Eric watched as the Red Dawn pulled away from the Iron Rose, 4 ships following it into the distance. He hoped Naruto would stay as the boy could be in a war zone. Naruto could effectively say war was hell. He'd been in small-scale battles before, he'd fought relentless bandits and enemies before. However, full-scale no-holds-barred warfare was absolute hell. Naruto had left the larger fleet and had continued through the Iron Island waterways toward the island of Pike. Almost immediately problems had begun to pop. Pike itself remained heavily defended. It had seemed whatever foothold Malekith had on the island had been pushed off before they had arrived. This meant surrounded by a large number of combined Greyjoy, Harlaw and Orkwood ships, and as well as sea defenses including large sea pikes and trebuchets. All of which would have torn his small fleet to pieces. Thankfully, however, his scouts had reported to him about an island 30 minutes away, and that had been a camping area. That is where they were now. The ships beached and anchored. On the beach itself his men had set up a rather large camp hidden under the Great Cliff. Naruto himself was within the largest tent. He stood in front of a map of the Iron Isles which sat on a simple wooden table. Around him the lesser lords muttera, each other taking in the latest report they'd heard from the scouts. "My lord, the island we currently inhabit is owned by House Sunderly and the lesser houses Salt Cliff and Black Tide. It is worse than we first believed, milord T." Voice cold and grim. Naruto turned to him, his confusion evident. "What is it, Captain Titos? What do you have to report to me?" Turning toward the captain, Naruto could see the face. "My liege, the slave camps are much worse than we could have ever known. If we are to take this island, it is better that we completely eradicate every house on T." Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly. "I wish to see these camps, Captain. We shall take 100 of our best men and eradicate one as soon as possible." "The man, he's worrying a mile a minute." He nodded slowly and left the tent, gathering men for what he'd know would be a traumatic journey. Naruto nodded to the two men draped in red cloaks and carrying large axes. "You two are with me." He turned to the other lords, garnering their attention. "You will stay and protect the camp while I'm away." The small number of men nod with their liege as he left the tent, already armed and armored. Naruto and his bodyguards met with Captain Titos and his division a moment later. Both groups moved toward the hills and began to climb, the captain leading. Top of the cliff, the darkness of night covering their movement. When they all reached the top, the Titos led them further down the hill behind the cliff. Over half an hour before Naruto saw the slave camp. He almost wished he hadn't. The camp wasn't incredibly large but was still wide enough to hold 400 people. Numbers were low, but that made it worse for the slaves within. Most were still moon on their backs, providing some light. There were others benign, tortured and flayed alive, their skin being peeled away like some demented tangerine. In one corner he could see malnourished slaves feasting upon one of their dead. They were gnawing on what seemed to be the arm and leg respectively. In A.S. could see the hunched forms of men forcing themselves upon any women and man for that matter within the camp, forcing them into intercourse and relishing pleas for mercy. Naruto and the men beside him almost released the contents of their stomachs when they watched a child be ripped in half by a group of hounds. Her blood poured across the dirt floor as her screams and pleadings echoed alongside the laughs of the Sunderly slavers. Naruto turned to the captain, his eyes steely and determined. "We attack on my order, kill everything, any slaves that wish to be set free, see to it that they be killed." The captain for once nodded in agreement without any ounce of insubordination. Naruto slowly moved forward toward the entrance of the camp. Bodyguards. All three were hidden from sight by the shadow of the moon. The closest sentry never saw the blow come. His head was torn from his body by the mighty swing of a heavy sword, a sword held by Naruto himself. The boy his belt and lifted it to his lips, playing a loud drone. Behind him the division of men led closely by the captain rushed from the undergrowth, taking the slavers them still midway through whatever barbaric practices they'd taken to. They never stood a chance. The slavers were cut down faster than wheat to a scythe, no matter how they begged or pleaded they were killed. Naruto charged in and had cut down at least. Rest had surrendered. He stared down the 30 or so men who'd surrendered to his forces, his disgust and anger prevalent, his eyes a sickly gold as they continued to beg for their live. Leave none alive. Captain Tito's was already going through with the order before Naruto had even finished, slitting the throat of the nearest man. Naruto had turned to the Nia. Kneeling down in front of them and lightly tapping their shoulder. I need you to tell me if there are more camps and where House Sunderly is located. It's crucial. Line break. Sansa had never been so fearful in her entire life. First she'd been told by her father that she was to be wed to the firstborn prince of the kingdom Joffrey. And first concerned about the marriage, she'd finally accepted her duty to marry him. That was until the king himself had died. That was when everything had gone to hell around them. After Robert had kicked the bucket, her father had become the regent on some unseen order by the deathbed. Then she'd heard the rumors. Rumors that none of the king's children were his own, all were a product of incest between Cersei and her own brother Jaime. If such a thing were true, it wow. And House Lannister. It was for this reason that she was under guard at all times. Her father had burst into her room at around midnight, his voice hurried and rushed, telling her the circumstances were she and Arya to follow any Lannister footman. Which it was concerning when she'd seen her father and his Stark bodyguard surrounded by Lannister footmen and Jaime Lannister himself. She'd left the key beside her as they rushed through the hallways, avoiding any and all guards. Arya, keep up, we need to leave before they find us, Sansa told her sister, holding her hand as they rushed toward the exit. Only to be stopped by 30 Lannister footmen. The captain of the checkpoint stared down at her, his gaze hungry and depraved. Look what we've got here, boys. Seems we got 2 doves who need their wings clipped, the heavily armed and armored man said. His gauntlet hand reach, grabbing it in a fist. Sansa cried out, tears flowing from her eyes as the man gripped her head tightly, his armored fist digging into her head. Arya punched and screamed at the as he backhanded her away from him. You two, he pointed to 2 of his men, grab the small wench and help me escort them to their rooms. Lord Joffrey told us no one is to leave, the man said. Her by her hair, her sister trying and failing to fight off the men. This continued until they stopped suddenly. In front of the captain stood 2 well-armed black-cloaked men with enormous woodman axes stood before them. In Lord Florent, he was fully bedecked in armor complete with his sword strapped to his side. And where, pray tell, do you think you're taking the princesses? The man asked, his tone cold and distant. The guard snarled at him, the hand not holding Sansa moving toward his blade. We don't have to answer to your flowery scum. His scorn evident at his word. Blade. It was then, the 2 men struck. Their axes flashed in the moonlight, drawing back and separating the guard's hand and head from his body. The second was 2 holding Arya as Lord Florent caught Sansa, the guard's axe spinning as it cut through both men's throats. Their red lifeblood spilling through their gauntle. Collapsed into a broken heap. Lord Florent looked at Sansa, his gaze filled with pity and sadness but also unbridled anger. I'm sorry you had to see that, my dear, but we must evacuate you immediately before the lions hear of this. Sansa nodded quietly as she wiped away the tears. My father? He still lives? She asked, hoping the answer would be a good one. Kevin nodded. Your father is safe but wounded. We managed to save him and his men before it got too dangerous. By that time, however, Jaime had already finished as they ran toward the back exit into Flea Bottom and toward the Tyrell Inn. I have to send a letter to Lord Tudor to informing of what's going on. He paused for a moment, allowing him to wipe the sweat from his brow. Thank the W. Allowing us use of his personal guard, although it was probably Lady Elaria who'd sent them in the first place. He paused. His eyes stony as he looked around, Something is wrong. The two guards were joined by 6 more identical men, although these men wielded shields. Acted subservient to the two originals. My lord, I do believe we're surrounded.